You're watching an amazing podcast from an amazing podcast company.
Leaked law enforcement documents, cold case mafia hits, and newly uncovered evidence that could potentially reverse a triple murder conviction. This is an exclusive 5-part series. The Organized Crime Task Force Files. Part 4, Silencing a Snitch, and another case never prosecuted. The facts from this story were compiled from information contained within investigative task force files from the Ohio Attorney General's Organized Crime Investigation Commission. Included are details about crimes which have never been publicly released. These files were provided to us by a source who wishes to remain anonymous. If you haven't been following along with the first 3 parts of this exclusive series, an organized crime task force commissioned by the Ohio Attorney General's office began looking into a Youngstown-based burglary ring at the end of the 1990s. The task force's ensuing investigation nabbed plenty of professional thieves and happened to gather intelligence on some decades-old mafia-related murders in the process. Once the prosecutions of the burglars were through, the Attorney General's office sanctioned a new round of investigations for the task force. Their job was to officially investigate a handful of unsolved mob killings dating as far back as the 1970s. In parts 1 through 3, we covered the task force's investigation into the killings of Joe DeRose Jr., Dominic Jr. Cenzarino, and John Magda. In 2 out of 3 of those cases, the alleged murderers were formally charged. The investigations also unveiled a multitude of mafia minutiae that local mob historians of any level would surely find interesting. Those killings all took place within a designated time frame from 1978 to 1981, during what's been called the Caribbean-Naples War. Now we dial back the calendar year to 1974 and focus on the investigation of Robert Talbert's homicide. There were no major mob wars happening in Youngstown at that time, but the mafia was still a present force, albeit one which lurked in the shadows.
The mob runs the town. What we know is the mob. That's what runs our total valley.
Narcotics, gambling, stolen cars, prostitution, pornography. They're preying on our citizens, and it's killing our community.
Former 6th Ward Councilman Robert Spencer, who first took office in 1974, would later sign an affidavit submitted to the U.S. Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, stating, quote, "In Youngstown, I believe the influence of mafia money in politics has at times compromised the integrity of the Youngstown Police Department, some courts, and many aspects of local government." The very year Spencer took his seat on the city council, a police burglary ring rocked the department. Yes, you heard that right. A burglary ring made up of Youngstown policemen. Tired of watching Youngstown's crooks have all the fun, over a dozen of the city's officers partook in their own break-ins and burglary operations, brazenly stealing from city business owners whom they swore an oath to protect and serve. On October 5, 1974, 2 members of the Youngstown Police Department were sentenced to 1 to 5 years in state prison, while 10 others received county jail sentences of 30 days to a year. More still were either suspended and or demoted. The Youngstown police burglary scandal is a basic primer for the Robert Talbert homicide. Who was Robert Talbert? Simply put, he was a fence for various burglars in Youngstown. A fence, if you're unfamiliar with the term, is a person who buys and then resells stolen goods. Talbert owned the Clark Super 100 gas station on Market Street and often sold hot merchandise from this location. He also owned a nearby used car lot. Talbert was just 29 years old on Labor Day 1974 when he was abducted, brutally beaten, and executed in an open field near South Avenue and McClurg Road in Boardman. Talbert's body was discovered by 2 small game hunters days later. His hands were tied and his kneecaps broken, and he'd been shot 6 times, 5 in the head and 1 in the chest. Who killed Robert Talbert? This was a question his sons, Rob Jr. and Dave, have been asking ever since. Many years ago, the brothers unofficially launched their own investigation, interviewing their father's associates, key suspects, and various law enforcement members who either came into contact with their father or investigated the case. Part of that searching subconsciously inspired Dave Talbert to later pursue a career as a policeman himself. Dave ended up becoming a member of the Salem Police Department, where he eventually rose to the rank of detective, investigating murders and other crimes. But when he retired in 2023, there was at least one cold case he wished was solved: his father's. As he'd come to learn over the years, his father's murder was never truly investigated to begin with. Not at the start, at least. When Dave Talbert first reached out to the Boardman Police Department in the early 1990s, he says he was told by a Boardman police captain that his father's case was shortchanged because he was an informant for the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol and Firearms, and was also snitching on local cops. Furthermore, he was told that Boardman police didn't really handle the case and that the department handed over everything they had on it to the ATF.
The evidence that I had was submitted to an agent at the police department from the ATF, and as far as I know, the investigation was taken over from that point by that agency.
Dave was then directed to the local ATF office, where he was told that the ATF doesn't handle murder investigations. In fact, they explained to Dave that they weren't even trained to handle homicides. Ordinarily, they would assist an agency in a murder investigation, but that was the extent of it. Unable to get the answers he was looking for from either Boardman PD or the ATF, Dave and his brother would eventually submit Freedom of Information requests. The national director of the ATF at the time, John McGaw, formally responded, saying he had no knowledge of Robert Talbert Sr., nor was Talbert ever a government witness for the agency. The only thing clear to the Talbert family at that point was someone was lying to them. Eventually, with the help of then Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum, the Talberts got another response from the ATF. This time, the letter said that yes, Robert Talbert Sr. was indeed a subject of an investigation, and that he did eventually become a source of information for the agency. In all of these responses they received, there was still nothing that showed an official murder investigation was ever undertaken. Finally, 25 years after his body was found, a real investigation into Robert Talbert's murder would begin when the Ohio Attorney General's Organized Crime Task Force took up the case. The task force detectives put in countless hours, traveling to several states and interviewing a variety of witnesses and suspects. When it was all said and done, they felt they cracked the case. But, as was the result in the John Magda investigation that we detailed in Part 3 of the series, justice was never served. Through their exhaustive research and dogged determination, they were able to show that Robert Talbert was a known fence for multiple burglars linked to mob associates in Youngstown. They also confirmed that Talbert was an informant for the ATF and that he testified on August 15, 1974, at a federal grand jury in Cleveland, Ohio. His testimony centered around a gun-running operation, detailing how local mob associate Anthony Tony Bruno approached Talbert to try and sell 78 stolen guns. Bruno was the owner of Bruno's restaurant located on Market Street, directly next door and in the same building as the Tropics nightclub. Both businesses were frequented by organized crime figures and burglary ring associates. After he was approached by Bruno to offload the stolen guns, Talbert attempted to sell them to a local car salesman who, in turn, told an undercover Youngstown cop. That officer notified the ATF. Not long thereafter, Talbert began supplying information which helped authorities seize a variety of stolen goods. His cooperation with the ATF eventually caused the arrest of Bruno and other organized crime associates Robert McGraw, Joseph Sedita, John Marinelli, Danny Mylar, and Ted Landers, as well as several Youngstown police officers. Once it became apparent to this group that Talbert was the leak, discussions were had about, quote, taking care of him.
Marinelli would later admit these conversations to the Organized Crime Task Force.
Talbert had to know that being an informant with his associations was extremely dangerous. The men he betrayed wanted them dead. Before his abduction and murder, 2 failed attempts were made on Talbert's life. He was shot at twice, once outside his home on Chalmers Avenue on Youngstown's south side, and then again at his car lot. At that point, the ATF offered to place Talbert into the Federal Witness Protection Program, but the young husband and father declined. What he didn't realize was that even more dangerous than the mob associates and crooked cops he was entangled with was a man who worked for Talbert at his gas station.
Robert Bobby Parks was suspected by the FBI in several murders. He had previously served time for shooting and killing a Youngstown man in 1967, but was back on the street within 2 years.
Upon his release from prison for manslaughter, Talbert hired Parks as an attendant at the Clark station on Market Street. The gas station job was only a cover, as FBI files say Parks was a contract killer who worked not only in Ohio, but across the country, with known cases in states like Michigan and California.
In a future murder trial, prosecutors would show that Bobby Parks even carried a business card inspired by an old Western television series that read, "Have gun, will travel."
Have gun, will travel, reads the card of a man. A knight without armor in a savage land. His fast gun for hire, he's the calling wind. A soldier of fortune, he's a man called Paladin.
Parks had been friends with Talbert and often visited him at his home. Less than 3 weeks after testifying before the federal grand jury in Cleveland, Talbert went back to work at his Clark station in Youngstown and was never seen alive again. Bobby Parks was working at the gas station that same day. When the Organized Crime Task Force began investigating this case in 1999, Bobby Parks was already serving 2 life sentences in prison for a separate contract killing. They began interviewing former Parks associates, including several in witness protection. With the information gleaned from these interviews, the investigators started building their case. Several key witnesses, including the following 4 individuals, helped provide damning statements that pointed to Bobby Parks and his brother Paul Parks as the chief suspects in Talbert's killing. 1. Rico Spann, a former associate of the Parks brothers, told detectives that shortly after Talbert was murdered, he had a conversation with Bobby and Paul Parks, during which the topic of Talbert came up. Spann says Bobby openly stated, quote, "I got rid of that problem," end quote. Spann further stated that Bobby Parks told him Talbert was an informant for law enforcement. Spann submitted a polygraph test and was found to be truthful on the matter. 2. A former love interest of Bobby Parks in the 1970s told detectives that she had a direct conversation with Parks in which he blamed Robert Talbert for shorting him money. Parks told the woman, who we've chosen not to name here, that Talbert would, quote, "end up being missing," end quote. 3. Robert McGraw, who was arrested and prosecuted as a result of Talbert's testimony, participated in meetings with his co-defendants about taking care of Talbert. According to a 1999 proffer agreement with the state, McGraw said he met with Bobby Parks after Talbert was murdered, at which time Parks told him, quote, "I got your boy. I shot him," end quote. Parks told McGraw that he had also stolen the cash deposits that Talbert was going to take from his gas station to the bank on the day he was killed.
4. Eddie Ferris, a former Mahoning County Sheriff's deputy and co-conspirator in the Joe DeRose Jr. murder, which we covered in part 1 of this series, entered into multiple proffer agreements in 1997 with the U.S. District Attorney as well as the Mahoning County Prosecutor's Office. Ferris said that on September 3, 1974, Paul Parks called him and told him to pick him up. After picking up Paul Parks, they waited at the corner of Princeton Avenue and Market Street in Youngstown, watching Talbert's gas station. Ferris says Bob Parks gave a signal from the gas station and they pulled the car in front of the building. Paul Parks went inside and, quote, about 30 seconds later, they come out with Talbert with his hands already tied. Talbert and Paul Parks got in the back, and Ferris drove off, leaving Bobby Parks at the gas station. Ferris, who had earlier had surgery on his throat and spoke through a voice box, proceeded to say, quote, he, meaning Paul Parks, pulled Talbert out of the driver's side door, back door, and threw him on the ground, and he's hollering at him. I'm not paying attention to what he's saying. And he straddled him. He sat on him, and he had the gun in his hand, 9 milli. No, I found out later on that was Talbert's gun. That was Talbert's own 9 millimeter. He took it off of him and beat him with it. He kept beating him with the gun. Then all of a sudden, I heard pop, pop, pop. He shot him. He said, let's get out of here. Jumped in the car, and we took off. According to Ferris, he was told by Paul Parks that Talbert was snitching and needed to be taught a lesson. Ferris also said he helped Paul Parks dispose of the murder weapon by throwing it into McKelvey Lake on Youngstown's east side. Ferris later led task force detectives to McKelvey Lake and pointed out the location where the gun was tossed. The task force followed up with the Mahoning County dive team, which advised them of a search previously conducted of the lake in 1983, during which a Browning 9mm high-powered semi-automatic handgun was recovered, the same gun that Talbert owned. The dive team also confirmed that the weapon was found close to the area that Ferris described. Ferris also submitted himself to an extensive polygraph regarding the above information and passed the examination. After nearly 5 years of digging and approaching the then 30th anniversary of Talbert's murder, the task force felt they had enough in 2004 to indict and convict Bobby and Paul Parks for the Robert Talbert homicide. They had recreated the crime scene, studied the autopsy report, identified and interviewed witnesses, performed and examined polygraph tests, submitted evidence for lab testing, prepared courtroom presentations, and even had a co-conspirator willing to cooperate and testify. The task force felt they were ready to present their case to the Mahoning County grand jury. Unfortunately, no grand jury date was ever scheduled. But why not? According to a letter written March 17, 2005, to Rob Talbert Jr. from Ken Marshall, then Executive Director of Ohio's Organized Crime Investigations Commission, the Mahoning County Prosecutor's Office declined to take the case. Marshall says he specifically spoke with Assistant Prosecutor Nick Matarelli, who told him that based on the evidence available and the credibility of the primary witness, they could, quote, never attain a conviction. According to Marshall, Matarelli, quote, is doubtful that we could even obtain an indictment in the matter, end quote. It should be noted that the 9mm Browning handgun recovered from McKelvey Lake by the dive team in 1983 was unable to be located by the year 2004. It should also be noted that the task force's primary witness, Eddie Ferris, was also a cooperating witness in the Joe DeRose murder case, meaning the Mahoning County Prosecutor's Office felt comfortable with Ferris's credibility when it came to prosecuting Sam Fiseska, but not with the Parks brothers. In 2025, we contacted Nick Matarelli, now retired from the Mahoning County Prosecutor's Office, and asked him about the Talbert case. Matarelli, along with his former boss, Prosecutor Paul Gaines, coincidentally had both been Youngstown police officers in 1974. Matarelli told us he could not recall the details of the Talbert case, nor could he recall any conversations had with Ken Marshall of the Organized Crime Investigations Commission. Regarding the non-prosecution of his father's case, Dave Talbert says it was explained to him that there were small inconsistencies in Ed Ferris's statement when it came to the actual murder, and that's what prevented the prosecutor's office from moving forward. Then there was the confusion over who actually shot Talbert. More than one witness said Bobby Parks admitted to shooting him, but Eddie Ferris says it was Paul Parks who pulled the trigger. Dave Talbert believes the truth lies somewhere in the middle. He says the evidence shows his father was tortured first and killed later. Perhaps both men took a turn firing some of the 6 shots. As noted earlier, Rob Talbert's sons, Rob Jr. and Dave, previously made attempts to investigate their father's killing themselves. Rob Jr. was able to reach one of the burglars associated with Talbert in the 1970s, Danny Mylar, who had cooperated with law enforcement in the same criminal investigation that Talbert had was placed in witness protection, and moved to Florida. He was later convicted of a murder in Alabama. The following is an excerpt from the actual phone call that Rob Talbert Jr. had with Danny Mylar while he was incarcerated in Alabama's Limestone Correctional Facility.
Back at that time, I didn't know your dad, and I had a nightclub up in Warren, Ohio.
Okay.
And there was a lot going on in Youngstown at that time. Fencing operations, chop shops, cars, gun running.
Wow.
And what happened was, I don't know what, because I don't know your dad's background.
Right.
When I first met him, I guess it was what caused everybody's downfall. Fences back at that time would pay, and there were some good ones up there in Youngstown that actually had warehouses, and they would pay like 25 cents on the dollar.
Oh, okay.
And which wasn't a lot, but they would take anything. They would take a load of ping pong balls. I mean, you know, they.
Sure.
Yeah, and so what happened was everybody started looking. So when guys would get these prime loads of things like electronic equipment or TVs or stuff like that,
Right.
they, instead of being straight up and sticking with their same fence, they would stretch out and try to find somebody that might pay them 50 cents on the dollar.
Oh, I see.
Make a little greed.
Sure.
Set in. So what happened was, your dad was one of them guys. Your dad had a car lot, used cars,
Yeah.
had that gas station. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but he had a, down on Martin Street, can't remember exactly where it is, but I know they drive in underneath. He had a garage there, and he had people chopping up hot cars
Oh, okay.
and putting them together and running them off his car lot. So maybe that's news to you.
Yeah, see, I thought, after he died, I think some of the ATF or FBI, one of them came in and took some cars off my stepmother. I had left about 2 months after my dad was killed as well.
That's why.
When I left. Okay, that's what I thought.
So what happened was, okay, so I know that he loves your stepmother and you kids because he kept you all isolated. Nobody went into the house or nobody ever saw y'all or anything. It's like he tried to keep y'all removed from all of this.
Right.
So anyhow, a guy comes to me and tells me that your dad's fencing. So he knows him, so that's how I meet him.
Okay.
And so what we're doing is we're contacting him now when we get loads of, when there's loads of stuff, electronic stuff and stuff that can bring top dollar. And he would pay more. Appliance stores, whole appliance stores he would buy.
Oh, okay.
So your dad had the chop shop going, he was running hot cars, and he was fencing and reselling, and then he had the used car lot plus a gas station.
Later in that conversation, Mylar tells Rob that his father was an informant while speculating what Talbert may have known. He also explains how word of Talbert's testimony before a federal grand jury in Cleveland on August 15, 1974, quickly got back to Youngstown.
I think your dad he got over his head. He wanted to have the money and the nice house and the whole thing, and he didn't want to be patient enough to wait. So he was sticking his fingers in everything he could stick his fingers in.
Oh, jeez.
And he was, like I said, so what happened was, the Youngstown police busted him with some hot cars on his lot. The numbers didn't match up.
Right.
All right, here's where your dad's downfall was.
Uh-oh.
In life, we all make choices, you know.
Right.
Sometimes we make good ones and sometimes we make bad ones.
Right.
They gave him an option right then. They said, we're going to charge you with these cars, or you're going to turn some cases for us. You're going to start telling on people for us.
Oh, okay.
So what happened was, your dad flipped over. They let him go on the cars, and so what happened was he started setting everybody up and getting them busted. He was getting whole warehouses busted for fencing operations and stuff.
Right. Right.
And one day, in the headlines, it said police recovered 20 tons of stolen merchandise from like 4 or 5 different places.
Right.
And your dad is the one that set everybody that up.
Oh, great.
And so what happened was, and then I'd heard he had a falling out with the guys he was in business with, chopping up the cars.
Right.
And he would do little things like this. They'd call your dad, okay, we got a load or whatever, you want to come and look at it. And if it had anything to do with like tools or anything to do with a garage, hydraulic lifts or anything,
Right.
he'd bring some of those guys from that chop shop with him, And they say, oh, no, we don't want it. And then later on that night, they come back and break into the place and steal it from the guy, from the crook.
Oh, gee.
You see what I'm saying? Making friends wherever they go.
Oh, boy.
All right, then, apparently, here's what's funny. I didn't even know that, to this day, I couldn't even tell you how Dad was involved with the guns, because there was, like, guns from 5 different gun stores from, like, 3 different states, and the feds and the ATF and everybody was hot on them.
Right.
And your dad didn't have anything to do with initially buying them, and the only thing I can figure is that maybe somewhere along the line somebody reeked after they bought them for a lower price, maybe contacted him and tried to move them.
Oh.
That's the only thing I can think of that would have made him a witness.
Yeah.
So once he testified, I guess, at the grand jury, I know for a fact, because the ATF told me later, when I was down when your dad got killed, I was in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Okay.
And they contacted me down there, and but they had told your dad repeatedly that he needed to leave Youngstown.
Right.
And they would have moved your stepmother and you kids and the whole 9 yards.
Right.
But he didn't want to do that. And he carried a gun with him all the time, and he thought that he was he could handle it. But what he didn't realize with, a lot of the people that he was getting busted and nailing and messing with were organized crime. And I don't care if you're carrying 20 guns, they'll get you when they want to get you.
They'll get you.
And so, as far as who's a suspect, I can name 50.
Yeah.
Because there's no way it would ever. I knew it would never get solved once I heard about it.
Oh, okay.
What I understood that the ATF told me there was 5,000 or 10,000 missing out of the safe at the gas station.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they found him dead a couple days later out. I guess some hunters found him or something. But it didn't have anything to do with a robbery. But there's and see, there was grand jury leaks coming out of the Cleveland grand jury.
Right.
So probably within hours after your dad testified in front of that grand jury,
right,
they knew about it in Youngstown.
Oh, okay. Do you think it was supposed to be known about? Because I was wondering if it...
No. What I'm talking about is a leak.
Oh.
They got criminals up there that...
Oh, I see.
It's all corrupt.
I see.
Yeah, so they called down Youngstown and given advance notice what was happening.
Years after that conversation, Danny Mylar was eventually granted parole. Also making calls as part of the brothers' investigation, Dave Talbert reached out to Bobby Parks directly. Again, Parks was also incarcerated for murder at the time. In 1977, a vengeful ex-wife hired Bobby Parks to terminate Dr. Leo de Blasio and his new bride. Parks ended up wounding the happily remarried doctor. However, he killed Patricia de Blasio and nurse Mary Muffley. Bobby Parks was arrested, and a murder-for-hire scheme unfolded in court. Parks was convicted and sentenced to 2 life terms in the Ohio State Penitentiary. By the 1990s, Bobby Parks was serving his time at Marion Correctional. As you'll hear, Parks plays it very cool with Dave, letting him believe that he and Rob Talbert Sr. were great friends.
It's like a puzzle with a lot of pieces, but there's a lot of pieces missing.
My dad was an informant, right?
Pardon?
My dad was an informant then?
I'm not sure. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I personally don't believe he was, but that's just my opinion. Out then there's other people that say he was. I don't know. Only your dad knows for sure.
All right.
No longer.
Yeah. He wouldn't. You mentioned the FBI before, like when you were a suspect and stuff. I know they're involved when it comes to a murder and stuff like that, but see, I was wondering if they would tell me if he was an informant for them or not. Earlier, I was talking to Mrs. Hill. Mrs. Hill said her ringer's not working in her office. Is there a way somebody can go down there? Thanks. Hi, Mrs. Hill.
I'm sorry. Our phones are archaic and best. And every now and then you just get cut off in mid-sentence. Mr. Parks is still here.
Okay, thanks.
Hello?
Hello, hi, Bob.
We cut off. These phones are...
I thought it was me, because I was on the cordless, because when you called, I was down at the pool.
These phones are real bad in your... I guess they're kind of like antique type system.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like I said, you know, to the best of my knowledge, I don't know firsthand if your father did or if he did.
Right.
You know, I tend to believe that he didn't. You know, because I liked your dad, and he treated me really good, and I thought, you know, he was a very good person, good family man. You know, he was striving, trying to make a life for your mom and him and the kids and stuff. I mean, I felt really bad when all that happened, and it really upset me when they come and said that I was a prime suspect, and they put me through all that, arrested me and questioned me and threatened me and all that kind of stuff. Because the day, like I said, the day that it happened, I was working that day. And, there's no way you can be
right
at the same time. But you know, they have their theories. But the thing of it is, in all these years, to the best of my knowledge, they've never come up with anything.
No.
Neither Bobby nor Paul Parks ever admitted any involvement in the murder of Robert Talbert, and no charges were ever filed. It's now been over 50 years since Robert Talbert Sr. was murdered. We asked Dave, who was just 3 years old when his dad was killed, how he feels about the case all these years later. He says the task force investigators did the best they could with what they had to work with. There was a lot of evidence that went missing from the Boardman Police Department that would have been crucial as far as DNA testing. The task force couldn't go back to 1974 to correct the work that should have been done back then. While he would have liked to see Bobby and Paul Parks prosecuted for the crime, Dave Talbert and his family truly appreciate the work that the task force investigators did on his father's case. Robert Bobby Parks died in prison in 2010 at the age of 65. His brother Paul Parks died 3 years later, a free man, at the age of 62. As we'll detail in Part 5, the conclusion of this series, the Parks brothers and Eddie Ferris were suspects in another murder mystery from 1974. The slayings of GM Lordstown security guard Benjamin Marsh, his wife Marilyn, and their 4-year-old daughter Heather. The organized crime task force uncovered information about this case, which now, decades after their investigation,
could potentially reverse a triple murder conviction.
That was an amazing podcast from an amazing podcast company. If you enjoyed the show, please click the like and subscribe buttons and share it with your friends. It goes a long way in helping us produce more amazing content.